This avalanche safety report is brought to you by MTN-TV. Learn more at MTN-TV.com.
Very happy to be here today again with Brian Lazar with Colorado Avalanche Information Center. And Brian, it's been a busy week for you. Tell us what is going on out there.
Yeah, it's been an incredibly busy week, and it's just indicative of the dangerous avalanche conditions that we have, which were spurred by the big loading event that took place, between Valentine's Day and President's Day weekend. It added a big load to our snowpack, and the snowpack was still adjusting to the load that we put down over those several days, which has led to widespread dangerous avalanche conditions. So all of these orange areas across the north and central mountains mean it's a considerable avalanche danger, or level 3 out of 5. And this is pretty dangerous avalanche conditions, even though we're moving further and further away from that loading event. And the chances of triggering an avalanche are going down. The sheer consequences of the size of these avalanches is what's driving the danger. And as we get into a warm up, as we move towards the weekend, we expect some more widespread areas of considerable avalanche danger. And if we look at just avalanche activity over the last week, you can see that avalanches have taken place in nearly every mountain range of Colorado. So no area has really been spared from the avalanche activity. And what I want to point out here is the avalanche activity over the last week did peak with our warm up during last weekend. And that's a precursor of what we're going to repeat again this week. And I do want to point out that the top of these bar charts, these darker colors are indicating very large avalanches. So these are avalanches that are big enough to kind of, push a car around or break some timber. And so these kinds of avalanches are very difficult to survive if someone were to get caught up in it. And that's what really is what's scaring us. We're not seeing big obvious signs of instability or waning. So you may travel all day without seeing any signs of instability before you trigger a very large and destructive avalanche. And it's really hard to point people to safer terrain. You can see in this avalanche rows that avalanches have taken place on every aspect and every elevation over the last week, pushing over 200 avalanches just in the last week alone. And again, it's the size of these things, which is really what's scaring us. So even as forecasters, we're moving around quite cautiously. I think the best way to illustrate the size and magnitude of these avalanches is to kind of just show you what some of them look like. And to further kind of highlight how dangerous the last week was, this is an image of a fatal avalanche accident near Berthoud Pass, Colorado. And just in the last week, we've had 8 separate avalanche accidents, 12 people caught moving debris, 9 people buried, 1 person injured, and tragically, 2 people were killed. And if not for some really close calls, those fatal avalanche numbers would look even worse. And here's a video montage of these avalanches and what they looked like just over the last week. So you can see how big some of these avalanches are breaking. Some of them are breaking very deeply near the ground. They're breaking very wide, crossing terrain features. A lot of these avalanches are being triggered remotely or from a distance, in some cases several hundred feet away. And so even us as forecasters, as we're moving around in the backcountry right now, are staying clear of most steep slopes and even avoiding runout areas because these avalanches are so big. We're very cognizant of overhead hazard, which is an important message to get across because we're going to see more of this kind of avalanche activity as we move into the weekend. And I will show you kind of one more video here, which just gives you an idea of what some of these avalanche debris fields look like. So you can imagine taking a ride in big, hard blocks like this. These kinds of avalanches are just very, very difficult to survive. Even if you're with people that have avalanche rescue gear, they may not be able to get to you or dig you out in time. So it's really a time to have very conservative terrain choices.
Very, very scary. And we have had some warm weather. What does that mean for the avalanche danger, Brian?
Yeah, so I'll just show kind of a map. This is surface temperatures. And you can see as we move into the weekend, these warmer yellow and orange colors are moving back into Colorado for the weekend. And just like last weekend, when we saw a big warm up, we saw an increase in avalanche activity. We're likely to repeat that scenario again as we move into this weekend. Will also mean we're going to have a return of wet avalanche activity as we move through the weekend, which kind of comes in 2 flavors. The easiest to predict and generally the less dangerous are these loose wet avalanches when we start to see the surface snow thaw. And an indication that wet avalanche activity is imminent will come in the form of like roller balls, slushy surface conditions, and little small wet sloughs coming out of rocky terrain. The more dangerous kind of avalanche is the one that's shown here, which are wet slab avalanches. And this is when we introduce meltwater into the snowpack, which weakens a pre-existing weak layer. And here's a good example from just a few days ago, west of Crested Butte. So we expect this wet avalanche activity to increase as we get into Saturday and Sunday. We're going to see wet slab and loose wet avalanches more widespread across the state. Then, as we move into early next week, things flip back to winter once again. So as we get into Sunday night and Monday, things will freeze. The wet avalanche activity will come to an end, and we will start to pile up new snow. And so we will have a return of storm snow instabilities, new fresh wind slabs, and of course, our persistent slab avalanche problem will stay with us. So a really dynamic period. So make sure you stay up to date with changing conditions and check the forecast.
Yes, everyone, be careful out there. Very scary. Brian Lazar, thank you so much. And I want to remind everyone, you can find out more. Always check with Colorado.gov /avalanche. I'm Shannon Lukens for Mountain TV with Brian Lazar.